was Jesse Briggs that time who was in the face of Michael Riley. But they got the first down, and they're at their own 45. Down by 23 are the BC Lions. Pressure coming again. Riley in trouble again, gives it away. Jefferson picks it off, and Willie Jefferson is going to take it all the way to the house. Bombers defense strikes with a touchdown.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Willie Jefferson, your 2019 and your 2021 back-to-back Grey Cup champions for your Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I'm here to wish all of the dads a happy Father's Day. Me being a dad, I just want to tell you guys, happy Father's Day from me to you. I know we probably don't get a lot of praise. You know, we do all the ins and outs, the behind-the-scenes stuff, the stuff that the moms don't do, the stuff that we have to do. So I just want to tell you guys, happy Father's Day. You are loved, you are appreciated, and we need you. Your family needs you, your kids need you, your wife needs you, your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your neighbors, your community, your church. We all need you, and we all want to come together and tell you happy Father's Day from me, Willie Jefferson, the Winnipeg Blue Bomber organization, and your church, the Oakbank Baptist Church. Happy Father's Day, Dad.
Hey, Oakbank Baptist Church. I wanted to wish all the men a happy Father's Day from Jackson Jeffcoat, defensive end number 94 for your Winnipeg Blue Bombers and two-time Grey Cup champ. I hope everything's going well. Hope you're having a great day, and hope everyone's doing well.
Hi, Pastor Bruce and everybody at Outbank Baptist Church. I'm recording this a little early for Father's Day. Wanted to wish everybody there a happy Father's Day. I'm sitting here holding my youngest one, Capri. Say hi, Capri. Just wanted to, again, say happy Father's Day to all the fathers. I've been blessed and lucky enough to become one here in the last 2 years. Here's my oldest one, Sierra. We're actually in Florida getting ready to swim. Like I said, we're a little bit before Father's Day taping this. But again, if your dad's still around, give him a hug and thank him as well, as I will on this Father's Day. Want to congratulate and thank everybody that is a dad, is a father, and is doing the most that they can to support their families and their communities. And just want to say, just keep going and get ready to cheer on the Bombers. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Cheers.
Allow me to say a happy Father's Day to all of the dads that are watching today. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we began a message series that we called One Hit Wonders. And our goal was to work our way through all of the books of the Bible that had only one chapter. And we learned that there were 5 of them. Each of these books can be read in less than 3 minutes. And as we said in our first message, these bite-sized books of the Bible are short, they're to the point, and they all carry a rather urgent message to the readers. The first of these brief one-hit wonders that we looked at was the book of Obadiah, a quick prophetic word that was directed towards the nation of Edom. And it wasn't a good news, feel-good sort of message that was directed their way. If we summarize the book of Obadiah into a tweetable sentence, the main point was that God always sticks up for his children. We then looked at the book of Philemon, a short letter that was written by Paul to a fellow Christian named Philemon. This letter focused around a runaway slave of Philemon's who had converted, who had become a strong worker for the kingdom of God. And Paul was pleading with Philemon to give Onesimus a second chance and to show mercy on him. Well, today as we come to the third of these one-chapter books, we're going to discover a short, simple letter to young Christians who were just in the process of learning how to spiritually walk. And John wrote this short letter to a particular church during a time of very intense Roman persecution. And it was written at a time when churches were forced to meet in secret. And one of the things that makes this such a great letter to be looking at on Father's Day is that it was written in a secret code. In fact, it was a mystery that this church actually needed to decipher. You see, John had a message to convey to this community, but he couldn't directly tell the church because of the anti-Christian political climate of the day. So John, throughout much of this letter, is speaking in code. He refers to the congregation as the chosen lady and its members as her children. In his closing, he refers to the congregation he is with, saying, "The children of your sister who is chosen by God send their greetings." In other words, the people in John's congregation send their greetings to this other congregation. And when you discover John's encrypted message, you also come to realize that the congregation that John is writing to had a lot of newer and younger believers who were just trying to figure out this whole Christian walk thing. So John writes to them, encouraging them to do three things. He tells them to walk in truth, to walk in love, and to walk in obedience. And we want to look at those three things today. So firstly, John urges these Christians to walk in truth. In fact, you pick up on this theme in the first few verses of this letter. He writes, "The elder to the lady chosen by God and to her children, whom I love in the truth. And not only I, but also all who know the truth because of the truth which lives in us and will be with us forever." He then goes on in verse 4 to say this, "It has given me great joy to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as the Father commanded us." So on the surface, it sounds as if the author is writing almost a love letter or a letter of encouragement to a mother and her children. But in reality, John is speaking to this specific church, and his encouragement would have been powerful to them. And that little phrase, walking in the truth, becomes an important one for John because it says something subtly that he couldn't say overtly. And maybe it's equally as important a phrase for us today in our postmodern North American culture as it was for this young church trying to navigate its way through a Roman culture that had now deemed them as being a dangerous movement. I don't need to convince any of you that our set of beliefs and our biblical worldview are currently going against what our culture stands for. Anybody out there need to be convinced of that? And that's very similar to what this church was dealing with. You know, the single most important question that a person can ask in their lifetime is, what is truth? And most of us would likely agree as an answer to that question that truth is that which corresponds to reality. And we believe that truth isn't subjective, truth isn't situational, and that truth isn't shaped by our beliefs, but it's really the opposite of that. In fact, we believe that our beliefs ought to be shaped by truth, right? And the question then becomes, how do we know what's true and what's not true? And that truth question had become an important one for this young church because there were those who were actively sowing seeds of doubt about some of the very foundational teachings of Jesus in the early church. And I love how John responds to these questions in such a personal way to this young church. In fact, he acknowledges that he was happy to find, as he puts it, some of your children walking in truth. Now, you can read between the lines here, and what he is implying is that much like in every church, some of your children are walking in the truth, and some were not walking in the truth. He actually follows that up in verse 7 by saying this, "I say this because many deceivers who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh have gone out into the world. Any such person is a deceiver and an antichrist." And then he builds off that even more in verse 10 when he says this, "If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take them into your house or welcome them." And John is writing this again to this young group of Christians because much like today, there were many deceivers out there. They were denying some of the non-negotiable aspects of our Christian faith. They were denying that Jesus had a physical body. They were denying that Jesus was fully human. And some were denying that Jesus was God's son. And as John put it, he says, any such person is a deceiver. And John's offering these young Christians this important reminder to walk in the truth, to not get sucked into these false teachings, and not to compromise with these non-negotiable beliefs. And that's an important challenge for us as well, isn't it? And this is why it's so important that we are spending time every day in our Bible. You know, devotions were never intended to be about developing a cold, meaningless religious habit that makes no difference in our daily life. Having a quiet time or a solitude time or having your devotions or whatever you might choose to call it. Well, it has everything to do with a daily decision that we make to walk in the truth. And we can't walk in it if we don't know it. And the more familiar we are with the truth revealed in Scripture, well, the more quickly we can identify the fakes and the frauds and the fiction in the flood of information that we all receive every day. And the better equipped we will be in the truth. John also encourages these young Christians to walk in love. And the point that John is attempting to get across in these verses is that while truth ought to determine our values and our views, love really ought to determine our attitudes and actions. And John talks about that in verses 5 and 6, where this is what he says. And now, dear lady, again, writing in code, right? I am not writing you a new command, but one we have had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. Now, even though the command to love one another is a reoccurring theme in the New Testament, what we often don't understand is that this was part of what made Christianity and the Christian faith unique back then. This is part of what made it stand out from the rest. It was part of what separated it from the other religions. And it was part of what it was known for. But really, this wasn't a new concept. I mean, John said, as we've just read, I'm not writing you a new command, but one we have had from the beginning. He also said this, as you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. And this has been the command from early on, really. In fact, in Leviticus 19:18, the children of Israel were told this. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So this isn't a new idea, but it was Jesus that gave us a greater understanding of it, and he put a much greater emphasis on it. In fact, it was Jesus who said that our love for others would be the heartbeat of our faith. It would be an identifiable characteristic to the world around us. And over again, Jesus urged his followers to love one another, to love their neighbor, and even to love their enemies. And he didn't just talk about that, did he? He didn't just tell us to do it, but he exemplified love in his own life. So what does it look like to walk in love? What is it that John is really asking these young Christians to do? It's almost as if John is encouraging them to go back and revisit what Jesus had said. It's almost as if John is encouraging them to go back and revisit what Paul had already written on this subject. I mean, think about this. Jesus talked about countless ways that we can show love to people. By accepting people, by avoiding prejudice, by avoiding discrimination, by listening, by helping and giving and serving. And Paul too talked about countless ways that we can show love to those around us. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 13, Paul employs this whole kaleidoscope of words to describe the full spectrum of love. In the original Greek, all 15 of the terms that Paul utilizes in 1 Corinthians 13 to describe what love looks like, all of them are verbs. And he's making the point here that love isn't simply a fleeting feeling or a fickle emotion, but love is active. It's the conscious choice to be self-sacrificing because love is not self-seeking, to be calm because love is not easily angered, and to be quick to forgive because love keeps no record of wrongs. This is what real love looks like. I think that's what John is really trying to help these young Christians to understand. He is reminding them that when you have a deep reservoir of love from which to draw from, then you have an eternal supply of supernatural love to give and offer to people. And that is a love that is always giving, always selfless, always real, and always grounded in the truth. When we find it hard to love, all we really need to do is to remind ourselves of the endless love that we've been offered. When we find it hard to love, all we need to do is look back and remember how unloving we have been and the daily grace that we've required. When we find it hard to love, John reminds these growing followers of Jesus that this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. More than anything else, that's what I want for this church. I want to be able to come here, and I want you to be able to come here. I want our community to be able to come here. I want the broken and bruised to be able to come here. I want those struggling with addictions to be able to come here. I want those over their heads in sin to be able to come here and to be surrounded by the love of God. I want all of us to live in the overflow of God's love and to walk in love, as John's talking about. I think that was John's desire for this church, that they learn together to walk in love. Well, in addition to walking in truth and walking in love, John also urges the chosen lady and her children, as he puts it, to walk in obedience. 4 times, actually, in just 3 verses, John mentions the commands and commandments of God. And then he adds this in verse 6. He says, and this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. Now that's how John put it, but Jesus put it a different way in John 14:15. He says, if you love me, you will obey what I have commanded you. And at some level, I think we all grasp this, don't we? We all understand this because it's perfectly illustrated by a parent-child relationship. I mean, there's no greater way to express your love and respect for your parents than to offer them your obedience. And if we truly love God, then the same principle applies. If we truly love him, then we are going to honor and obey him, and we will willingly submit to him. But admittedly, a lot of us struggle with this, and this is a point that John is trying to make to this church. Putting it in football terms, I mean, a lot of us see ourselves as the quarterback of our lives who like to make the calls and their own plays and make their own decisions rather than letting the coach call in the plays from the sidelines. But loving God means being willing to trust and obey God to do the things that are right, no matter what. I mean, we may not always understand exactly why God wants to do what he wants to do, but are we willing to do it anyways? Are we willing to put our trust in him? Are we willing to be the earthly quarterback that lets him call in the plays from the sidelines? John says, and this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. You get the impression that John has just scratched the surface of really all the things that he wants to pass on to this young church. And he closes off in verse 13 with this encrypted message. He says, I have much to write to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face so that our joy may be complete. I want to suggest to you that whether you are a young Christian or a veteran, whether you're new to this whole faith thing or you've grown up with it, that John's advice to this persecuted church will ultimately determine the direction that your journey takes you. John tells this church to walk in truth, to walk in love, and to walk in obedience.